I know how to make money, and I can prove that over a long, really good career. I really press on hard analysis. Hard analysis doesn't mean you're going to get it right, but it sure beats having a dream. So you need a few things. You need a real product that appeals to an age group that's young enough that it overwhelms them. And you need to have scarcity, because that's the real way that you build a relationship with your customers, having what they want when they wanted it at a price they think is fair. 13 people of our turnaround team went on to become CEOs. That's a world-class team. And the self-awareness / narcissism, that's the other part of it, because God forbid you become successful. Sometimes look out the window. Sometimes you need to look in the mirror.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. Now, HubSpot is the resource that you need to tap into if you are an entrepreneur. It's no secret that starting a business is hard. Even if you have an amazing idea, bringing it to life can feel overwhelming. With HubSpot's new entrepreneurship kit, you can go from idea to IPO with the help of a company that knows a thing or two about growing better. This all-inclusive kit gives you step-by-step guidance and frameworks to help you crush every stage of starting a business. With tools tailored to help all steps of the entrepreneurial journey, it's packed with templates for project management, emails, skill development templates. There's also a solopreneur guide. It's got freelancing, pricing worksheets, and lots more that you can use to get up and running immediately. And best of all, it's free. With expert guidance and frameworks from HubSpot, starting a business doesn't have to be hard. So don't wait to start yours. Go to HubSpot.com/ENT to download the guide right now. Gary, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. You have had some incredible success. We're going to talk about Laura Mercier. We're going to talk about GameStop. We're going to talk about Kinko's. We're going to talk about when you had portfolio companies, when you moved from operator to capital allocator with private equity. We can talk about the book. We can talk about your podcast. We talk about all of it. But when you look back at everything, you've had lots of successes, tons of failures too. When I say what was your most notable, your most, I guess, jarring failure that you learned from over your career, what's the first thought that comes to mind?
There's no question. It's first, second, and third. When I learned while sitting in the Austin airport that when I left GameStop, just after 13 years and was 2 years into Laura Mercier, the cosmetics company, and had just left an Electronic Arts board meeting. I had been using my stock. My stock had some real value when I left GameStop, and I decided to start borrowing on margin, scratch the surface, and would never. Where I got in trouble would be at 10% of the lowest stock price it had recorded since we had gone public. So I never paid attention to it, and I knew it was a great long-term investment. Sit down the Austin airport, there's a Wall Street Journal sitting next to me. I pick it up while I'm waiting for my flight, and I look at it and see that GameStop was under $1. And I realized, why didn't I get a margin call? Oh my God, I may be broke, because I was on that margin up to, I don't know, $8-9 million. And I had clearly busted the covenant, and no one had called, no one had notified me, no one had anything. And I sat there and went, oh shit, I'm broke. How could I have gone to where I just was 5 minutes ago to today, to this moment? I went to the bathroom and threw up. I didn't know what to do. And that's been the worst moment of my career. And as it ended up, I did the right thing, and it managed to rescue me from everything. So, but nevertheless, that was a very rough night.
No kidding. What was the right thing that got you out of that?
The right thing was I called the president of the bank who had my business, and I said, Ron, I need to let you know something, because you guys didn't let me know. I just looked at the stock page, Wall Street Journal, and looked at, then it was called NeoStar Retail Group, looked at the stock price for the company, and it's way below the threshold where you guys could have conducted a margin call. And so I'm letting you know you didn't, and you should have. And I'd like to come in with my hat in my hand and try and figure out some way to get through this. what he said when I got there for that meeting, he said, yeah, as soon as you get home, I need to see you. And went up there, big conference room full of people. And he said, tell this group what you told me. And I reiterated the story. And he said, nobody in this room has ever had anyone who had a loan that was secured by anything and busted a covenant come in and self-disclose. And we have no experience with this. So here's what I'm going to say to you. How long do you think it will take you to get this sorted out? And I said, it could take me a year. And he said, then you've got a year. We would have, in the normal course of business, we'd have sold your stock to cover that. And we missed it. And since you self-reported, we're going to give you time. And then I went to my accountant. I'd had 2 appointments, and then I went straight to my tax attorney who did all my taxes forever. He said, you can do 3 things. You can sell our Mercier cosmetics. You can sell your house. I had a big high value house, and you can go get a real job that pays you, because I wasn't taking any money out of Laura Mercier at that time. He said, those are your 3 choices, and you're going to need to do 2 of the 3 of them. And I was so pissed off that I'd put not just me, but my family, my personal finances in this sort of jeopardy. I said, screw it, I'll do all 3 of them. I sold Laura Mercier, I sold the house, and I got myself a big paying job and dug myself out of it. And the job was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I said, I'll commute. That's fine. I'll commute there, fly there on Sunday night, get back on Thursday night. I screwed up. I did the crime. I'm going to do the time. And I really punished myself over that for a long time. And you can imagine, I have no debt ever since. I took care of that. I got completely square and sooner than a year. Paid them back, paid everyone back on everything, and I even ended up doing pretty well. In the situation I was in at that time, way before Kinko's or anything else. So that's the worst.
That's not fun. No,
I don't wish that on anybody.
I don't think a lot of people would. I don't know how many people would be able to navigate through that. Like in hindsight, it sounds like you did it very gracefully. I mean, you sold a company, you sold a house. That's not the normal playbook.
And got a real job, and as it happened, that next real job was incredibly lucrative, and that was before Kinko. So I mean, I got myself back in the fairway, but every day I looked in the mirror when I woke up, I was pissed at myself. That was like, it was a knucklehead thing to do. Everything about it, because the stock price had gone up to, last time I looked, it was 30. And look, it's $1.50. That's sickening.
Like this high risk, like obviously you had a propensity for risk. You didn't mind taking risk. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that. But I mean, sometimes it bites you in the ass too. But do you think that risk over your career served you more than hurt you?
Yeah, no, and I laugh because 2 things are true. Sometimes people don't. And I also find that this 2 things thing, a lot of people can't get their head around. 2 things be true. I know how to make money, and I can prove that over a long, really good career. I also know how to lose money. and I can prove that over a long career because I'm an investor, startup, I invest in an array of things, and I can have something I've been feel very strongly about, let's say, and overinvest in it, and every bit of it goes away. So, I've had 100 baggers, and I've had a lot of them that go to 0. And so, yeah, am I high wire act? Was I when I was younger? Yes. But when I made my big score, we sat down with our financial folks, and we agreed, how much will you take away from me to ensure that if I get run over by a bus tomorrow, my family and my future and all that's all taken care of, and I can't touch it. We agreed with that, and then we took what's left and said, go knock yourself out. Keep doing what you've been doing, invest in what you like to invest in, and do that. So I've been more judicious, shall we say, ever since. And the pattern recognition thing has enabled me to learn enough that I think I'm better at evaluating opportunities now than I was probably earlier in my career.
And you mean that across, starting something new, investing in something, taking on a role. Like, I mean, pattern recognition is huge. It just sucks that you had to go through that to get to the point where you recognize the patterns. And I would even ask, you know, we're trying to give advice to people that are earlier stage. Well, okay, pattern recognition is great after you've gone through that shit and then you come in on the other side. How do you maybe remove some of those pieces so that, yeah, pattern recognition is important, but somebody who sold their company, exited, how do they navigate that? Because there's no playbook for post-exit.
Yeah, I think the most important thing we did, and I just mentioned it, was with someone we really trusted, a really important asset manager kind of person. We all agreed on how much I would, and we call it throwing over the fence. You know, make a bunch of money. How much should go there where I can't get to it? I literally said, I can't get to that. That's unavailable to me. This is what I have to invest in. Being able to take a step back and say, you can't put it all at risk. Don't do that. Put away enough on your first big score that'll take care of you till you die. You know, and then you can monkey with the percentages as you get older and you see more opportunities and you feel more strongly about your ability to realize something might really be good versus maybe not so good. So that's how I do it. And we call it literally throwing it over the fence.
Yeah, and that's smart. We'll talk more about how you invest and how you do your due diligence on startups and some of the opportunities you put money into. But before we get ahead of ourselves, obviously we have to go back to the beginning. So I didn't realize this because I'm probably too young, but GameStop was not always called GameStop. So talk to me, how do you pronounce that?
First of all, it's Babbage's.
Babbage.
Named after Charles Babbage.
Yeah.
An 18th century mathematician and entrepreneur in Victorian England. He invented stuff like the cow catcher on the front of railroad cars. He also invented something that his first big invention was called the difference engine, and his second was called the analytic engine, and they were both the precursors of today's computers. And he essentially figured out he could weave numbers, much like a jacquard loom weaves fabric. He could do that with numbers. His girlfriend at the time was a woman named Lady Ada Lovelace. She was Lord Byron's daughter, and she helped him by developing the punch cards that he built to use. His biggest sadness in his life was he died before he could make it work properly. Why all of this is important is because, and this will shock you because of your age, when we started Babbage's, which became GameStop, we couldn't use the word software. Number one, no one knew what software was. It was not in the vernacular, and 9 out of 10 people thought it was intimate apparel, thought it was women's intimate apparel. And if they did know what the word software was, they were incredibly intimidated by it because it was such a big IBM, it was such a big thing that no one wanted any part of it. So what we were trying to do with our first name was find a way to explain what we do in a way that people will come into our store. So we showed never-ending loops of gameplay on early video game machines on monitors in front of the store with a big picture in the back of the difference engine and a plaque with Charles Babbage's name. Well, of course, 6 years later, everyone knew what software was. And no one still knew, like you, who Charles Babbage was, but everyone knew. We were doing $400 million under the name Babbage's. So it's not like people didn't find us. They found us and came to us in droves because we were the first video game store in the world. And so wherever we showed up, lines showed up to get to our product. But we had the opportunity when we bought Software Etc. stores in Minneapolis. Their only thing was, we will not be part of a company that's called Babbage's. And our thing was, we will not be part of a company called software, et cetera, but we made it a merger of equals with the agreement being we'll come up with a new name for the combined entity. And we shut them down in Minneapolis, moved them to Texas. And then I left to start Mercier. My partner and co-founder became chairman and CEO, and their CEO became president of the combined companies. And that was how it got that's how it became GameStop.
I got you. When you think about being a first mover in the video game space, it was a brick and mortar play originally, right? You're opening up a brick and mortar. Yeah. So
there wasn't digital.
There wasn't. Yeah, that's fair. That's a stupid question. That's a stupid question. So what do you think, prompted you to open up a video game? Did you have a background in it? Did you come from it? Did you enjoy video games?
Great question. And the reason I like focusing on this is it informed my strategy in starting cosmetics, and it really informs the way I look at new business plans for startups. Okay, so my co-founder and I were both classmates in business school. He finished top of the class, and me were kind of the other bookend, but we were best friends. We played poker every Friday night with a group of guys. We were very good friends. So, of course, what happens when you're number one in business school, you get to go to Bain or McKinsey or one of those places. And sure enough, he became a senior partner at Bain very quickly when we graduated. I went the retail route. I went into a department store business mainly because the woman I was going to ask to marry me wanted to live in San Francisco, and that was the only job I could find in San Francisco. So I became a department store guy and developed. So we come together 4 years later, and I'm talking about why I think department stores are doomed, because specialty stores are emerging from the limited, the Gap, Zales, Joy, you name them. Specialty stores became dominant channels of distribution of any product of consumer goods that reached measurable size. And it was, of course, always the highest margin businesses, and they were taking our lunch from department stores. And I was in a very successful division of Macy's, and I was the top merchant in it. And you could kind of see him lumbering towards a swamp. Well, Jim had replanted himself in the Silicon Valley for Boston, and his clients were early video game companies, Activision, Electronic Arts. So he was very excited when we met to tell me about this new wave of entertainment. And if you go all the way back to black and white TVs, you go to early hi-fi stereos, you go to Betamax, you go to every single category of consumer entertainment goes through a hockey stick. And everything that he pulled together relative to Moore's Law, what was happening with semiconductor chip technology, and the curve on which delivered higher graphics, better gameplay, more speed. He said there's going to be a battle, and there are going to be multiple video game hardware units out there, each with their own specialized software. And he said it's going to be a free-for-all to see who's going to win this. Well, that was just like when when stereos first came out, they sold in JCPenney's and Sears and department stores. And then people start saying, well, this is great, but where are the records? Where's software? Where's content? Yeah. And the department stores didn't know they would put 4 records up there. But then record store chains emerged. When digital movies came out, a Blockbuster emerged. And so I was saying, Jim, everything he was telling me about what would be the penetration of video game machines into homes, and then computers into homes, and software for each hardware type. I said, Jim, this is screaming for its own software specialty store, and we need to get a first mover advantage, and you need to quit your job at Bain, and I need to quit my job at Macy's, and let's go make a run at this thing. It was an incredibly well-informed decision. I mean, we went to the Consumer Electronics Show in January in 1983 when there was kind of nobody there in Las Vegas. And we went to see all the video games, and I got to talk to all of them because I really was kind of the merchant of between Jim and me. And we both came back very excited. So, and I guess I'm explaining it so broadly because we did our homework.
Yeah.
We didn't wake up in the morning and say, I have a passion, I have a passion for women's jewelry, or Jim and I weren't gamers, but we had a passion for what we thought would be a nascent industry that would grow very rapidly. And, I think that people are really given a disservice when they're told in college, follow your passion. Well, it's like waste management CEO. That wasn't their passion, but I've done pretty darn well with it. So one of the things I always look for was there disciplined analysis up front that could talk about size of the sector, growth rates in the sector, why your vision is different than anyone else's vision, and on and on and on. I really press on hard analysis. Hard analysis doesn't mean you're going to get it right, but it sure beats having a dream. And a lot, you would not believe the number of startups that have visionary entrepreneurial founders who talk about their dream and their vision and their this and their that. And I'm sure that's good for some people, and a lot of them have made a lot of money doing it. I'm not an investor for that kind of startup.
Hey guys, Scott here. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say a heartfelt thanks to every single one of you. 6 years of this show, and it's really all because of you. Your listens, your support, your shares. It's what keeps this thing going. When I started, I had no idea how big this would get, how many lives we touch, the stories we share, the lessons that we learn together. It's truly humbling, and I believe that we're building something really special here, a community where no one has to reinvent the wheel. We're all in this together, learning and growing. And here's my ask. If you love this show, if it's made a difference for you, please share it with somebody who needs it. Tell a friend, post on social, whatever works. It's the best way to keep this thing going strong, bring on even better guests, and share more life-changing wisdom. And you can find us on all the spots. So you can go to successstorypodcast.com if you like listening to podcasts. If you like video, you can go to YouTube. It's youtube.com/c/Scott D. Clary, or the newsletter.scottdclary.com. Just spread the word. I'm eternally grateful for each and every one of you. Let's keep learning, let's keep growing, and let's keep making this world a little bit better together. All right, let's get back to the show. I think that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, right? And everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, even though they don't understand how much work it's going to take them. So you have sort of two sorts of entrepreneurs. You have people that try and productize a skill set that they have, which is not a bad thing, but it's not going to be a disruptive blue ocean that they're going to be going into. There's going to be 100,000 people.
Yeah, it's hard to put a motor around all.
Unless you're so exceptionally qualified. But then, even then, you have to build a brand around yourself. There's going to be, 10 to 15 years of building that proof in the market. The other type of entrepreneur, actually there's three types. So the incorrect type is the one that, like you said, the visionary, the dreamer that wants to be the Stanford dropout that's going to go build the next thing, right? I think the most successful entrepreneur, statistically as well, I don't think it's just me, my musings, it's the person who solves a problem in the industry they've worked in since they were like 20 years old. And they notice that one thing that doesn't work. Now that's hard because that means that you need patience to be an entrepreneur. You have to be around long enough to know that there's a problem that exists. But you kind of fast track that a little bit. You didn't live in video gaming until you were 45 and then try and build a company that solved the problem in video games, right? So that's another, what I guess I would ask, what are the main signals that you look for from an outsider coming into an industry that indicates a potentially emerging market? Because I'm going to go ahead and assume you copied and pasted the strategy with Laura Mercier because you did not have this love for cosmetics coming out of GameStop.
Well, but I did have all responsibility for all cosmetics at Macy's, for the division of Macy's that I was the senior merchant in for 4 years. So I knew about cosmetics. So let's just to be clear on that one. I didn't just kind of fall up in that. And since I had been involved and I was highly curious about the roots of the cosmetics industry, I already understood how cosmetics emerged as a consumer preference from the 1930s when a makeup artist named Estee Lauder started putting makeup on movie stars' faces and said, wow, I could make a company out of this. And her husband Joe helped her, and next thing you know, Estee Lauder was born. And I learned about how the cosmetics industry went from makeup artists to scientific technology to fashion. And all of a sudden, when I heard makeup artists are coming back in play again, I went, whoa, everything old is new again. If that's true, here will be the next stages of it. And so I was able to come to a plan. Let me find a makeup artist. And I found a woman named Laura Mercier. So, it was the same. That was how I came up with that.
So I'm not from this industry. So Laura Mercier was, and my girlfriend's probably going to kick my ass for asking this question. So she was a real person.
She will, I promise you.
Yes, she was. So she was a real person.
She remains until today a real person. She was doing she was Madonna's makeup artist. She was Angelina Jolie's makeup artist. She's a makeup artist to a bunch of movie stars and rock stars. And when Vogue would run a fashion model on their cover, they would ask her to go. She's a real. So what we did is we said, hey, we will put you in a lab. We'll do a license agreement with you. We'll pay for all the development. You need your own line under your name, and we'll take care of everything else. And I got myself a co-founder out of Neiman Marcus who was very current in cosmetics, and she and I ran that.
So this is what every YouTube makeup artist is now trying to do. This is the same playbook.
Yeah. Seen it, done it, been there. It's a lot harder than it seems, and the graveyard's full of cosmetics products.
When you look at the brands you built, so Laura Mercier, from somebody who doesn't know makeup, knows a little bit about Laura Mercier. So I'm assuming it's a very popular brand, to say the least.
Global. It's a very top global high-end fashion brand.
And when you look at like the evangelism and the loyalty that you've built with the customer base for Laura Mercier and GameStop, what do you think the secret is in building the fan base of a company so that it goes global? It's not just a great product. There has to be something else to it.
Again, GameStop, I have to put in a class by itself. And the reason why is no one understood what happened when that became a meme stock. They didn't understand, how can this be happening? The relationship with GameStop and its customers, it is extraordinary and was extraordinary, so that for gamers in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, GameStop was part of the fabric of their lives. They measured time by product releases. They measured time by when they showed up at midnight at a GameStop to stand in line in freezing weather with their mothers having taken them there to pick up a game that was going to drop at midnight. No one understood. Everyone talks about fans, and everyone talks about building a relationship with your customers. There is another level, and it is, ask Swifties, ask Taylor Swift fans, ask Beyonce fans. They get it. There are legions of people around the world who mark events in their lives by Beyonce releases, new albums, and that's the relationship. And it was unique in all the world of consumer goods in the 90s and 2000s between GameStop's customers and GameStop. So when all of a sudden a hedge fund, when no one knows how to spell hedge fund, but they're all on Reddit together, they're gamers and they talk their trash on Reddit, someone is trying to do what to this company that has been part of my life since I was 9 years old? Hell no. What do I have to do to stop that? By the tens of millions of people. That's a relationship that no one could have seen or known. Jim and I knew it, we founded it. We'd never seen the way customers glommed onto the company. We were not surprised to see it, but the rest of the world was, and so was Wall Street.
Do you think that there's even one tip that you could give for somebody who would want to build? It seems like it's an impossible question to answer, but I am curious if you have some insight as to what makes a company to that degree so intricately tied to a fan?
So I think it's a combination of a few things, not the least of which was new product introductions and new game releases. And why that was important is it did not take long, maybe 4 years. The only company bigger than us, even as Babbage's, was Walmart. Toys R Us, we were kind of the same size as Toys R Us, but Walmart was bigger. So we could get outsized deliveries of product, which is critically important. If you're dying to have a new game and you know it drops at midnight and you know GameStop will have it, you also know that Walmart can't get their act together to be open at midnight, much less have bought enough stores or distributed it correctly. We had such refined systems that we knew how to get the product where the customers were for that product. So they had a better hit rate than anyone else, any other retailer for these game launches. And we got that feedback from the market. And the better we did because we could make the argument to Nintendo that instead of needing 15,000 new pieces of hardware for their new Nintendo game system, that we could get 24,000. And we would have trucks at the dock when the ships unloaded onto our trucks. Our standard was, I can't remember what our standard was, but it was something like 50% of our stores would have the new title within 6 hours of it being unloaded off of a ship. We rented planes, we rented trucks, we did everything so we could deliver for our customers. Well, that builds a customer relationship. Pretty unique. I don't care how good Laura Mercier is, as an example. I don't think she could bring out a color that people are going to line up for and fight over. I don't think Bed Bath & Beyond is going to come up with a thread count sheet that people are going to be so crazy. So you need a few things. You need a real product that appeals to an age group that's young enough that it overwhelms them. And you need to have scarcity, because that's the real way that you build a relationship with your customers, having what they want when they want it and at a price that they think is fair.
And I think there's a cultural component too. I think there's this like X factor.
Oh, by the way, our store managers and people that worked in our stores, do you know how easy it was for us to find people? Gamers flocked us. They said, I'll work for free. Can you just hire me? Well, we never let people work for free, but we didn't have the problem that other places might have in being able to staff their stores. People would kill for it. And we turned out monthly teaching tools to teach our people how to do it. We had a checkout system where people who worked in our stores could check out a new game and go home and play it. So when someone comes in and says, hey, tell me about this game, Dune 1. What's that about? Or what's World of Warcraft about? They had salespeople who were every bit as enthusiastic as they were. Maybe they had already come up with some Easter eggs or some hacks in the game that they could share with the customer. Look, when you get to this level, here's what you do.
Yeah.
That relationship gold. And we had competitors who could talk about that, but they didn't deliver it. And we did. And that's yet another reason. Gamers liked hanging out in the store. They liked talking with people who worked there because they were simpatico. It was a very special relationship.
So difference between what you did at GameStop, which was very blue ocean, very tactical, and when you brought that company to market. Laura Mercier, you're very tactical, but cosmetics was not blue ocean. Cosmetics is red ocean, super saturated. What's the difference in how you took Laura Mercier to market? Was it the original influencer with Laura Mercier, or was it something else that made it successful?
I think it was mostly that, and the way cosmetics are distributed, you always start at the top, meaning you've got to be able to get Henry Bendel's or Bergdorf Goodman or Neiman Marcus. There are a lot of people who want to carry it, but if they carry it, it dilutes your brand. So it's not enough to know who you have to sell it to. They've got to buy it, and then they've got to present it in a place on the store on their floor that suggests to their customers, whoa, this must really be a hot new thing. So lots of that kind of stuff in the cosmetics business. And once you've been in Neiman's and once you've been in Saks, 3 years later, you can go to the high-end department stores. You can start going into other channels, but the distribution model is pretty set. The only trick is getting the large retailers to agree to play their role.
But for a consumer good, like anyone who's listening to this is going to be like, hey, Gary, it's not that easy to get into Neiman Marcus with a new cosmetic product. So what was the thing that allowed? Was it your track record?
It was back then. No, we could point to a line called MAC, M-A-C, which was a Canadian line called Makeup Artist Cosmetics, M-A-C. So MAC and then Estee Lauder had already bought a company called Bobbi Brown doing the exact same thing. Bobbi Brown's a makeup artist. And then there was only one other makeup artist, Trish McAvoy, and that was it. And then Laura Mercier was the third. And today, the reason that it's so hard is, there are about 1,000 makeup artists out there now. You have to, I am a big fan of first mover. When you see the wind changing in a business, and that's what was happening when I jumped in with Laura Mercier.
That makes sense. So you wouldn't go into cosmetics and makeup today.
And I can't tell you the number of cosmetic companies I've been asked to be on the board. I did go on one because they had a really interesting twist and extraordinarily successful. But yes, so no. The answer is no. Me and cosmetics, nah.
Okay, so now you had to sell Laura Mercier. So to bring it back to the first story you were talking about, so you had to sell Laura Mercier. It's not a fun thing to go through. So post Laura Mercier, holy shit. So just walk me through. You sold Laura Mercier, sold your house. What was the third thing you had to do?
Get a job that paid real.
Get a job. That wasn't Kinko's yet. That was another company.
No, that was another company. And there's this recruiter who wanted me to meet with 2 junior apparel companies that were public. And the deal was I was supposed to pick which one of them I wanted to join the board of. So this is happening in parallel with this other stuff. I had been responsible for all junior sportswear in the department store business. So I had a big and successful background in cosmetics and junior sportswear, things like that. I decided I didn't want to join either of the boards. I didn't like the companies. I didn't like anything about them and didn't feel like I would be happy there. And he was, of course, pissed off. He said, I promised them you'd pick one. I didn't know which one. Now you're saying you don't want either one of them. That's like peeing on their baby.
And at this point, you have no money either. Technically.
No money.
Okay.
No money. So he called me a week later. He said, you owe me one. He said, there's this company called Car America based in Washington, D.C. They've been around for over 100 years. They are a REIT. They own a bunch of, I couldn't spell REIT. I mean, that's how bad I was. But they said they own this service out office operation. They bought it. I think WeWork, just to cut to what it is. It was like WeWork. And said, we want to roll up there's lots of franchises in Europe. There's lots of this, that. I want to roll up all this stuff. And I met the guy. He and I had gone to the same graduate business school, and we hit it off famously. And I said, look, if you've got some good support staff around here, I'm real happy to think about this. And I jumped in, and we made 46 acquisitions in like the first 18 months. So that by that point, there were only 3 big companies left in the world, one in Australia, one in the UK, and our company. The company that was second biggest in the US came to us and said, we would like to buy you on one condition. We need your management team to take over the combined company. So Tom Carr at Car America, when we got the numbers, it was like telephone book numbers for me. It was an unbelievable score, just really crazy real estate kind of return. But on the other hand, it was almost 50 acquisitions. Yeah, we'd done a lot to build an organization. And so we sure enough merged, and my team took over. I moved it to Dallas, and life was good, except the new owner that they had bought us, this number 2. I didn't like their chairman, just for an array of reasons. And but I thought I could sell it again. And he agreed. I said, look, there's 3 of us. I know the owners and the founders of these other 2 really well. Why don't you let me take a crack at selling it to one or the other? And we can make a big return just because we got a merged company. And he said, great. And so I started working on it, and it was harder than I thought because neither founder wanted to either pay the price I needed from them or let our people stay, all that kind of stuff that gets caught up in those negotiations. So at the same time, I was made aware of the Kinko's opening, and I'd had lots of laps around the track by this time. And Kinko's had one foot in the grave. The prior 12 months before I started, it had lost 11 million of EBITDA, and the PE firm that owned it said, there's something in my contract that if I suggested that we just needed to shut it down after 9 months, I would be assured I would get a good payout just because they could cut to the chase. But that's my baby. When you ask about my whole career, Kinko's was...
I just want to take a second and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story. The HubSpot Podcast Network has incredible podcasts like The Product Boss, hosted by Jacqueline Snyder and Minna Kunlo Sithep. If you want to take your physical product sales and strategy to the next level to create your dream life, you need to listen to The Product Boss. They sit down for an hour. They do a workshop style podcast. They're going to talk about everything that you need to know to up-level yourself. Social media, marketing, if you're in consumer packaged goods, if you have any sort of physical widget, you need to tune into The Product Boss wherever you get your podcasts. It's so funny because it's not even what you were known for. So the founder of Kinko's, he sold to the private equity firm, and then in traditional private equity firm fashion, it seems to go in the wrong direction after it gets acquired by a private equity firm.
But this was for something that was knowable, and they missed.
Yeah.
The reason it went into the crapper was because big PE firms, especially those that are organized around operations, tend to believe that command and control will always win the day. We will figure out what we have to do operationally, and then we'll force it into the company. And there's really only 2 kinds of operational styles, if you will. There is the academy company, command and control. And by the way, that the CEO they brought in had been the CEO of Sam's Club. But as when I started calling Kinko's the People's Republic of Kinko's, the PE firms started to get it. I happen to be an entrepreneur. I happen to embrace the history of Kinko's. I just had to get them to understand that where we were was not a tenable place to be. And I was able, and it's all in there, it's all in the book, how I got that minus 11 million EBITDA, first 12 months on the job, plus 120 million of EBITDA. Year 2, plus 180 million of EBITDA. Year 3, 2/3 of the way through the year, we're mapping to 240 million of EBITDA, and that's when Fred Smith walked through my door. So we figured it out, and it was a great team. It was a team effort, but I had enough pattern recognition in my background to understand what I needed to do to start the wheels moving for a mega turnaround, and it worked. I may have been lucky, but it was pretty amazing. And
I don't think
business.
We're laughing before we started recording because you wrote a book that's more of like a business book versus a memoir. And we're talking about your editor who keeps pushing back on the fact that as you're writing your memoir, you say, I got lucky, I fell up, whatever. I'm listening to you now, and it doesn't sound like anything was that lucky. It sounds like you knew what you were doing again and again and again and again. I mean, you don't luck into, listen.
That's correct. But you know what you do? You build a great team. When I say great team, this is another one of my proudest moments in business. 13 people of our turnaround team went on to become CEOs. That's a world-class team. And how we recruited them, got them on board, and harnessed that energy is a book in itself. But the real book is And this is something that I picked up along the way, and it was my pattern recognition. When all I heard from everyone, when I'd say, what's going on? What's wrong? How'd this get so bad? Everyone would say, it's a bunch of things. You know, everybody was completely demoralized. It's so many things. And Napoleon is sometimes credited with saying, if you want to know what's going on at the front lines, go look. I'm a big believer in that. I personally walked over 700 malls in America getting Babbage's / GameStop up and running in the right locations, not just locations for a mall, locations inside of a mall. That's what I did. And what I've done in everything I've ever done in my career is I tie my rear end to an airplane and I get out there and meet people. So when I started at Kinko's, I told everyone at the home offices in Ventura, California, I'm gone for the next 6 weeks. I'm going into all 42 regions in America. In every market, I'm going to run town halls across all 3 shifts. And I'm going to be asking, we had 25,000 employees. I'm going to be asking every employee at Kinko's, what in the heck happened around here? And what in the heck do we have to do to fix it? And by the time I was done, they knew what to do. The store managers, it didn't matter whether I was in Seattle or Miami. I heard the same story from everybody. And so I came back with a plan, and we had put the plan in, and the plan worked. And monumental turnaround. And I used the other thing, which no one believed. I sought out Paul Orfalea because that's kind of how I roll. I called him, and of course, he didn't want to talk to me because he hated everybody at CD&R, and he assumed I was another suit. He didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I said, would you indulge me and just meet me for lunch here in Ventura? And he met me for lunch. And he came in loaded for beer. He was pissed off. His face was red. 4.5 hours later, and into our second bottle of wine, he was just having a ball. And I worked through him also to get to and it's all, this is all in the book, what we did, but he embraced everything that I was trying to do. And he loved the parts of the old Kinko's, which were gold, just gold. I brought them all back, or I left them there. I wouldn't trade those for the world. And that's how you turn around a company. Everyone bought in because the plan was, we're going to do what all the managers said we should have done in the first place. That's what we're going to do. And it worked. And they all had signed on for it. So it was just very cool.
Yeah, no, as I was reading this story before we jumped on. So Paul kissed you in front of 3,500 Kinko's team members, which is hilarious. That's very funny. That was after the turnaround. That was going into the turnaround. He had bought into it. I had invited him to meet me after Ventura. He was banned from the stores. He wasn't allowed in the stores. But I'd been invited to the Olympics in Salt Lake City by Xerox. We were Xerox's biggest customer in the world. And I said, Paul, would you meet me in Salt Lake City? I'll take you on tour of stores. And he's like, well, I can't go in stores. They won't let me. I said, Paul, I'm going to let you go in stores. So we went, and by the time we were done there, it was really clear he and I had good chemistry. And I explained to him the whole turnaround plan. And he was saying, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. He agreed with all of it. I said, what if we planned a surprise at our store managers meeting, and no one will know but you and me? I'll announce you, and you come out and talk to them. I said, they will go nuts. And he was so excited, he couldn't stand it. And that's when everyone had told me, oh, he's so dyslexic, he's so ADD, this is going to be the world's biggest disaster. He's going to go up there and talk for 30 minutes. They gave me 100 reasons not to bring him on for this. And I said, guys, I need him. And I talked with Paul Orfalea, and I said, hey, here's the book on you. You're going to take 30 minutes. You're going to promise 10. You're going to take 30. You're going to do this. Gary, I want to talk so badly. I promise you, you can come out and you can give me the hook yourself, but I will stay inside 10 minutes. I will say what you need me to say, da-da-da-da-da. And so we were supposed to meet out in the middle in this big stage in Las Vegas, 3,500 people. I announced him, and sure enough, the place goes bonkers. And as we had planned, I walked from the podium to the middle of the stage to greet him. I was supposed to shake his hand and then exit the way he came out.
and he would go to the podium and speak for 10 minutes. He stopped. I had my hand out. He didn't reach his hand out. He took my face and kissed me on the lips in the place. And of course, I'm stunned, but in my head, like, I said, this is done. This is a winner. He is endorsing the turnaround plan. Every single reason not to do this will fall away when this company sees him kiss me on the lips. I have been anointed by the Godfather. And I mean, I walked off and they said, see what happened? And I said, I did see what happened. And it was awesome. He's going to speak for 30 minutes. I said, hell, I can speak for an hour. This is game over, guys. And it was.
That's amazing. You know, you have you've joined a private equity firm, correct?
After Kinko's, during it was owned by Clayton Dubilier and Rice, and then I went to TPG after.
That's right. Well, I was going to ask,
Kinko's was sold,
because you've seen the good and the bad when it comes to private equity firms and founders selling their companies to the right and the wrong people. So what are some lessons that you've learned from Kinko's, from any of the transactions you've taken part in, that you now, I'm assuming with TPG, you try and do things right? So what are those lessons for an entrepreneur or founder?
So I was with TPG for 13 years. But in 2019, I started a glide path out, and I just left the last the board that was of a TPG company a year ago. But so much, this is where the pattern recognition really started paying off, because I had seen so much. I could tell. So investment teams from PE firms go and they meet with companies and they try to decide what is a good company, good fit, good reasons to buy them. And I would sit in the same management meetings they were sitting in, and I would see things completely differently from what they were seeing. And so I guess because they weren't experienced enough to know that body language sucked around the management table, for instance. I went to one management presentation in Chicago once. It had 12 members of the management team sitting in the front. 9 of them had their arms crossed almost the entire meeting, rolling their eyes, looking down. It was toxic. And everyone said, this is a great company, we're going to buy it. And I was like, whoa, guys, we need to rethink that. And so PE firms, PE firms are not unlike the management styles, command and control versus entrepreneurial. Essentially, I describe an entrepreneurial company as you ask for forgiveness, not permission. There are PE firms that are very rigid in how they analyze companies and how they do their due diligence. And they have a playbook, and I think that's a good thing. But if they don't execute to the playbook and have things like assess the culture, what is our investment thesis? We've heard their investment thesis. Does ours align with theirs? Usually doesn't, by the way. Usually when PE firms buy a company, they think they missed something, either strategic roll up. I mean, they've got usually a different agenda than their target company. And I think that you just have to be very careful if you're distributing authority down that low, that you've got really good people on the front line. And so what they end up doing the first time they have a bad transaction, it all starts going right back up to the top. And all of a sudden, people who thought they had authority in one of the silos, technology, consumer, healthcare, all of a sudden they get overridden in what's supposed to be the final investment review committee review, that finally, a founder says, I don't like it. We're not going to do it. So I know that was very interesting part of my career for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm also curious on the flip side. So now you have the advice from the perspective of the private equity firm on how to manage a relationship with the founder or the entrepreneur, but also how do you make sure that if the transaction does go through, it is a success? Because I think I've seen outside of maybe companies that, Google and Apple acquire, because it's a very specific incubation style acquisition that they deploy so that the company doesn't get basically eaten from the inside out. I think a lot of acquisitions don't go great. You've done a ton of them. What makes an acquisition go well versus not go well, outside of like they miss something in due diligence, because that's an obvious. But say the company is performing well, it's profitable, it's growing, company acquires it, starts to die, kind of like what happened with Kinko's. How do you avoid that?
I'll oversimplify it, but it is truly, you talk to me about the team you assembled for this, because typically it is very typical for a new owner, a PE-based owner, to put in somebody they've hired into the CEO job. It's as easy as missing at what Clayton Dubilier and Rice did with the CEO of Sam's Club. You look at that and go, oh, golden. They got a seasoned CEO, yeah, but he's a command and control guy. And you can just imagine when he walks into St. Louis and says, I'd like all of your carpet to be blue, and I noticed it's red. Except the founder of St. Louis is now the district manager, and as soon as the CEO leaves the market, he tells everyone, disregard that. We're not going to do that. And so if you get the wrong CEO, they build the wrong team. And if they build the wrong team, now you've got insurrection, and you've got people at the water cooler gossiping, and you've got glass door blows up. The team is the single first point of the spear of what can go wrong. But I'll tell you, you said it, and you are right. More of them go wrong than go right. But I would add to that, at the start, it is seldom that you see a smooth move from the day the acquisition closes to the day they sell it or distribute it or go public or whatever they're going to do. Because invariably they did miss something, or they had to pivot into something, or some part of the business would not be able to coexist with the new business that they wanted to launch because they thought that was a great opportunity in the marketplace. And it can be any number of things, but you can absolutely get the ball back in the fairway if you're honest enough, if you're having monthly performance reviews in a company. So you have these monthly operating reviews, and you have a template, and all the members of the senior team, once a month, they come together, everybody goes through their page. And if you can find things fast enough, you can react to them and impact the future. So I wouldn't quite say that, they don't all go bad. They do go bad in the early days more often than PE firms ever expected they would. And now you're in a staying power game.
But it's about whether or not you can recover. It's the recovery. Yeah.
And that's where you have to get real with yourself. You got to get honest. And, I have this other saying, people call them Kusinisms. Sometimes you look out the window, and sometimes you need to look in the mirror. And what you tend to find is many top management people in companies tend to look out the window when something goes bad. Oh my God, did you see what our competitors did? Or, oh my God, did you see what happened to our cost of goods, or whatever? But they seldom look in the mirror and say, what have I done to contribute to this? And what am I going to do to help us get out of this? And if you've got a good culture with the senior team, that sort of behavior is reinforced by the CEO that, oh, wait, he's not shooting people when they do something wrong. We're all going to come together. We're going to put our heads together. How are we going to get through this? And then that kind of promotes more honesty and integrity among the senior team, and you can get to that right answer.
I want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, LinkedIn. Now, let me share a quick story. When I was looking to hire for my team, I needed someone who not only had the skills, but also fit our company culture. I turned to LinkedIn Jobs, and it made the process seamless. The quality of candidates I found was exceptional, and it saved me tons of time. Having quality candidates to interview is essential, and LinkedIn Jobs makes it incredibly easy to find them. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It's a platform that connects connects you with professionals you won't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching but might be open to the perfect role. And did you know that 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites? If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're missing these candidates. Plus, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. And they're always looking to make the process easier. They even launched a feature to help you write job descriptions. So if you're ready to find your next great hire, post your job for free at linkedin.com/excellence. That's linkedin.com/excellence to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I love that. I want to just touch on a couple, if you have a second to do this, a couple of the soft skills and ideas on personal development that you speak about in the book. And what we've gone into today is sort of just like, we've done a little bit of memoir, a little bit of tactics. Before we sort of, I don't want to say pivot, because it's all part of the same conversation, but if people actually want to go pick up this book, just give me, for the listeners, what are they going to get out of it? Who's it for?
So the book is really for anyone on their own journey in their career. It gives lots of ways to think about your journey and lots of ways to give you permission on your journey to do things your way. And I go into pretty great depth about that. But through my stories, and the book is more a collection of stories than it is anything else, but there's stories where I learned something important. And the whole book builds to my 6 leadership principles, which emerged at the back end of my career as I thought about every single thing that I had seen, good and bad, along the way. What are a set of principles that could be evergreen in a company? And by the time I left Kinko's, I had already installed these leadership principles, and I used them in my role at TPG. When I would be a lead director or a member of the board, I would talk with the CEO, not about mine as the definitive leadership principles, but you need leadership principles as a North Star in your business. And let's talk about what is important to you. I'll tell you what was important to me, but that doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. But you get but if you can have open, honest conversation about that. And I have to tell you, the one thing I'm sure of, the leadership principles keep you, especially when you can never be ready to face all the stuff you face in business. I spent 25 years as a CEO, first one thing, then another, and I continued to see crap happen at the end of my 25th year that I couldn't believe, that I would just say, you have got to be putting me on. How could this be happening? And so I don't think people should reinvent the wheel. I think that if you understand when things that people would call soft, that we're going to have honesty and integrity, we're going to have respect for others, we're going to have open, honest communications, that just those 3 by themselves inform someone on what to do if they just learned something they wish they hadn't learned. Well, we're going to have open, honest communication. Then that means let's disclose. And of course, that comes back to my bank thing. I mean, everything will come back to something, and the book builds up not just to the leadership principles, but also to operational tactics, which I go into in the chapter before the last chapter of the book.
I love it. So the book, just so everybody knows, is called Always Learning: Lessons on Leveling Up from GameStop to Laura Mercier. So that's going to be available at literally anywhere you get books, I'm assuming. And we'll put everything in the show notes as well. You speak about a few different things, which, I've heard. So just to itemize them, you speak about emotional intelligence, you speak about continuous improvement, you speak about resilience, strategic thinking. These are all traits that we've heard before. I want your unique take on some of these traits, some of the maybe your opinions on them as to how they're useful, how they're not. And you can go one by one or whatever, because everyone's going to know continuous improvement. I don't think people are going to disagree with that. But why? Why is that so important? How has that helped you in your career?
Sure. Well, starting with continuous improvement. And by the way, my co-founder, Babbage's / GameStop, Jim McCurry, and I were talking about this in depth last week, and think Jim has convinced me that I may need to rethink continuous improvement and maybe drop improvement and make a continuous change, because the world is changing wildly and dramatically and with a greater speed. The reason I've always said continuous improvement is you want to constantly be better at everything you're doing, because that's a path to glory. If you think about scale, if you think about just improving year over year performance, continuous improvement is critical. But as Jim pointed out to me, yeah, it's critical, except sometimes you're so focused on the operational changes or the operational improvements that you'd like to make that you miss major strategic imperatives that are changing right underneath you. In the case of video games, talk about a huge insight. Right now, everybody thinks well, of course you do that, but used video games and refurbished video game systems, well, that's a big idea. That's a very big idea. And it ended up being $500 million of the profits of GameStop each year was simply their used sales and the refurbished hardware sales. But that's used. Well, that's a change. That's not continuous improvement. That's a change. The migration after us out of the malls, because the new leadership, and this is not Jim and me, these are the new leaders in the company, saw the way power centers were starting to pop up all over America, and it felt like the easiest, cheapest, highest ROI thing you could do to pivot out of major regional malls and into these power centers. That's a change. That's continuous change. You wouldn't have thought about that if you were just trying to improve operations. So those are those kinds of things. I do think the way I like hiring people who are going to report directly to me, if during the course of an interview, I don't hear something like, I want your job, if I don't hear that, that's a bad thing, because I tell them I need someone who wants my job, and then my job is to make them successful. And if they are successful, I'll do whatever I have to do to ensure they become a CEO. So that's important. But this other thing, and this is, you'll laugh at this maybe, but I don't need someone to say, I have a burning desire to win. If they have that, I think that's great. But I don't look for that. I look for someone who will refuse to lose. And that is a very different mindset than win at all costs. It refusing to lose suggests a tenacity, an aggressiveness, and an ego thing that simply, no, in the face of insurmountable odds, you keep coming back. That's different than I have to win, because those kind of folks sometimes throw in the towel a little too quickly. So I like hearing either one, but I have to hear, if I don't hear I've got a burning desire to win, I need to hear I refuse to lose somewhere. I like that. Is critically important. It's critically important. And then just this whole leadership development. And the reason I did this book and the reason I'm doing this podcast with a friend of mine, Jill Lewis, is I started mentoring, about 20 years ago, and it came to me. I did not go to it. I didn't read a thing about mentoring, but people kind of wanted my opinion about stuff, and that started growing to where now I've got over 1,000 mentoring sessions. We actually went through my date books from the last 20 plus years. And so this feels to me like a way that I can mentor more broadly, where I don't have to sit down at a lunch with one person. And that's, between this and the podcast, fills me up. If I can hear someone say, wow, good timing on this. I was faced with a particular issue, and just reading this, I think I've sorted my way through it. Well, that's a win. That's a win for me.
And it's about leverage too, right? Like you're leveraging like audiences, you're leveraging technology to get the message out, because you can hustle your way to the first milestone, but after that, it has to be leverage. You can't mentor 1 million people. You just
that is true. And it's also true when you talk about evaluating companies, you need to understand what scale is, and you need to have some idea. Does this company even know how they could leverage their scale? Yeah. And because that's a very important, if you're deciding whether or not to make an investment, that's something you want good line of sight on.
You mentor a lot. That's actually an interesting point. As a mentor, how do you choose a mentee? As a mentee, how do you choose a mentor?
Well, I do think that's a great one, and one that I've been pondering lately, actually. So again, I don't decide who to mentor. I am a very different, my background is episodic. So it's either someone I know or have worked for, or someone I know said, why don't you call Gary? And they essentially come to me and say, hey, I've got this situation. Maybe you can help me think about it. That's how it comes to them. And I might hear from them again 3 or 4 years later and not before. I don't have a regular mentoring relationship with anybody, and I never have. People just kind of come to me, and I like the episodic. I like to believe that perhaps over a lunch, I could ask enough questions. And I go into detail in the book about the Socratic method of teaching, and I've really embraced that. And the danger of the word should. I simply ask questions. And if I do my job correctly with someone who's trying to solve something of importance in their life, they will have an aha moment when they come to the answer that's right for them. Because there's never just one answer. There are an array of answers, and you just have to pick what's best for you.
Very wise. I love it. And everybody always has the answer inside. They just need somebody to pull it out of them. We always know what we have to do.
And it's not just, it's giving them confidence to listen to themselves and to decide what might be right. I love when people, because it's almost like a cartoon. They sit up straighter, their chest kind of bows out, their shoulders I know what I'm going to do. And I love being in the situation where I can say, well, what is that? Because we haven't talked, it hit them in their brain, and it resonated in a way that all of a sudden they felt awesome. For me, that is success, and that fills me up, and that's what I've done, and that's what I want to keep doing.
I love it. Okay. I have one last question to bring it home. You look back over your entire career, you've had multiple successes. If you were going to tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would that thing be?
It would have probably been be very aware of the impact of your choices in work on your family and on the growth and development of your kids and of your community. And I've been married 47 years. So I'm not, I didn't fail at that, but boy, I could have been better. I could have been better. And that's probably this work-life balance thing that everyone is complaining about with Gen Z and all that. I'm not complaining so much about that as other people are. I do believe and tell people, look, if you're going to be an accountant, guess what? March and April, you got to check out because you're around the clock. Or if you're in a Christmas business, guess what? Thanksgiving to Christmas, you don't get to hang around. But you better find a time when you are around and when you need to, like I always knew I would be home. If I was in Dallas, I would be home at 5:45 at night so I could have dinner and spend the whole evening with the kids with their homework, baths, putting them to bed and all that. I'd take it out the next morning. I've been known to be at my desk at 3 a.m, but you have to be able to say, these will be the blocks of time that I will not violate. And they are for my other interests. And if you don't have a family or if it's a small family, you've got something, whatever it is, whether it's a workout regime, whatever it is, you have to be able to you've got to be able to compartmentalize your life in a way that you actually can do it and not go crazy.
Yeah. I just on that point, do you think it's because you did it, you maintained a marriage, a family, you said you could have done parts of it better. Do you think that this is something that entrepreneurs struggle with that is not discussed or spoken about when they're getting started? This is like one of the sort of I don't know how to put it, like one of the negatives of entrepreneurship that people miss the mark on the most when they start to build their own thing. They don't understand like the commitment that it's going to take? Or do you think there's a version of entrepreneurship where you can have balance?
I think it's all resident in the person. If you are a person that is so obsessive about what you're doing, but you're not obsessive about your spouse or your family or your kid, however you want to slice it up, well, that's sending a message that you need to know, that you need to be aware of, and you need to understand the implications of that on whatever those other things are. When I got a call, it's been 20 years ago, I got a call from American Airlines, and they told me I was their number one flyer in the history of American Airlines. And so I was thrilled, and I've got a bunch of little planes all over my office. Except then when I thought about it, it's like, why am I so proud of that? I'm not, that is not okay. That speaks volumes. And I had to live with that. And I live with it still.
So know what your vice is. And I think that work can be a vice, and building can be a vice, and know what your vice is, because if you don't have the self-awareness, it can destroy you, even if you're building something incredible.
Yeah. And the self-awareness / narcissism, that's the other part of it, because God forbid you become successful and all of a sudden you have more money than you've ever had. You got way more money than you need or can spend. And maybe you start believing your own press clippings. And is that a good thing?
Yeah.
People are inclined to want to do that because they are probably the most surprised person in the room to find out they've been that successful. But you need to think about and think about it in a cold and sober way. How will my life change, or how should it change, or how can I manage how it changes in a way that still feels good to me, feels good to my spouse, to my family, to our lifestyle, to everything else. And you can't not have that conversation. You can have it with yourself staring in the mirror, but you better have it.